Hi Guy, welcome to the AMIGArama podcast. I'm your host Lorfarius, and for this week in our 28th episode we are going to be taking a look at Frontier Elite 2. But as always, before we jump right into that, let's have a look at some Amiga news. Now sadly at the moment it's a bit sparse with it. I've been keeping an eye out, but nothing's really been catching my eye. But by all means, if anybody hears anything, just pop onto the Twitter feed, which is at AMIGArama Pod, or over onto the Facebook page and just look for AMIGArama and just drop a comment or something you might have found, any articles of interest or no, even reviews will do. I'm quite happy to have a good look at anything passed my way and include it in an episode. First thing I was looking at we're on a site called Bytecellar.com, and they recently did an article where they've converted a load of artwork from a very modern game called No Man's Sky. Now, if you're not sure what that is, this is very good timing because it's an Elite style game with space exploration, going down to planets out in space and just full on exploration, full on like gorgeous, real beautiful visuals, gorgeous graphics, things like that. And this guy's come along and he's basically reconverted them to run on an Amiga 1000. Now I'm going to post a link to it in the show notes, but he really has done a fantastic job and he walks you through it step by step, includes lots of images, even has a YouTube video which shows all the slides in order. It's well worth looking at. I had a good 15 minutes browse at that. It really was entertaining. Now the next thing I've been keeping an eye on and off for now for a few weeks is over on a site called newamiga.com, and around about middle of April they announced that they'd come up with the design for a brand new Amiga. So it was very, very Flortian, flat to the floor. It reminded me of style-wise to the ZX Spectrum Next, which I'm sure a lot in the retro scene are very familiar with. If you're not, it was basically a Kickstarter project where they wanted to create a Spectrum as it would be today, with all the advancements, but fully compatible with everything on the Spectrum before, which might not sound like too big of a thing, I suppose, because you can pretty much emulate a Spectrum on anything from a calculator to a pocket watch these days. But they've come up with a similar sort of idea. I mean, it was just a design idea and they were showing lots of pictures, but one thing they've been working on really extensively is like the front end emulator, and this is like a team from Norway. Now I put a link up, there's a couple of articles because there's the link to the original site, and then over on Old School Game Blog they go into it in a lot more in depth. They've asked a few questions, post lots more pictures. You can probably pick up some of the original stuff because sadly the guys from the site have decided to pull down the original post because a few people were saying, well, you haven't got permission to build a brand new Amiga, and they weren't claiming that's what they were doing. They were just presenting the idea of a design. But a lot of people were getting upset, just calm down for a minute and see what they were coming up with as an idea. They were showing like videos of the front end emulator and it looked pretty good. Nice big colourful icons, all the games listed with info and history, maybe something similar in a way I think it was to like Xbox Live or like the C64 Mini with the big pictures and lots of text. It looked fantastic, but they are still working on the emulator. And they've said in a follow-on interview that they are trying to contact all the relevant copyright holders and stuff. So they might be able to come up with something. But one thing I have been hearing as rumours on the grapevine, I think I said it in the past episode, to do with the C64 Mini, they have an in with the door for now through with Cloanto, who own all the copyright and stuff, and I think they've been hinting at that they'd like to tackle the Amiga next, and they're already doing like a full-size recreation of the C64, but the Mini has come first. So it might be that we end up with both. We just don't know. It might just be that the Cloanto turn around to these new Amiga guys, say, sorry, we've already passed on the copyright stuff, you can't do it. But it's going to be very, very interesting, and I'm looking forward to what's going to happen. I mean, it's always great to see like the idea for this, just to have a brand new Amiga that would be fully compatible with all like the Amiga expansions and has all the ports on the side, but has a newer side to it. You can say maybe you can plug in like a USB drive to act as a compact flash drive. I mean, one of the things with compact flash sticks to this day is, they're like 20 years old now, and a lot of the newer ones, I don't think they're compatible. They're not even making it. I'm not sure anyway, but all this tech has a time limit on, and even the original hardware does, so it'd be interesting to see what's going to come from this. Now, in other news, I'm sure I've mentioned this a few times, but I watch a lot of videos from the Lemon Amiga site. And a few days ago, I had a bit of a chat session with the guy behind this all called Dan. And we're hoping to do some sort of collaboration video soon. We've been playing a few games, playing around with Amiga Live and stuff, and just trying it out online with like streaming services and so on. It's all a bit up in the air in the moment, but quite looking forward to doing something special with that, because it's not something I'm really familiar with doing with other people online. But whatever I do, it'll probably be linked to either in a future episode, or I'll post some sort of footage, or mostly it'll be over on the Lemon Amiga channel, which I don't think that gets enough appreciation, to be honest. It's one of the first places I go to for any sort of video content or research. I'm always there first thinking, well, they've always got pretty much all the big games covered, so it's great for that sort of thing, and it really goes in depth on stuff. So yeah, go and check out Lemon Amiga, guys. And with that, it's time to move on to this week's game. Now, for this week, I have picked Frontier Elite 2. Now, this is not something I was very familiar with as a kid. I completely missed the second Elite craze, as it were. I did experience the first game on the BBC Micro back in the day, and about 10 or 15 years ago, when I was going through my first retro craze, really, I managed to get my hands on a BBC Micro, and this was the game to get hold of, and I think I tracked down a brand new copy from somewhere, and I spent like weeks and weeks playing it. I mean, the original even then held up incredibly well, and even going back to it to this day, it's still a pretty good game. And when I was approaching this one, I thought it's going to be special. Whatever I come upon with this, it's going to be in the same vein or to that extent. Now, it was published by Game Tech. It has a bit of a weird story between who developed it. It started off with Game Tech or Konami and David Braben involved, but there was some sort of disagreement, and then later on Konami was dropped from the actual development of it. I think they sold the full rights onto Game Tech. Something very odd went on there, but it was completely down to Game Tech in the end, and it was quite rushed out towards the end, because I think it was about 5 or 6 years in the making, which was a hell of a long time, especially for an Amiga game. Anyway, it came out in 1993. There was a CD32 version which came out several months later, but the benefit with that one is not only did it work with the controller, but it also had a much later edition of the game. I mean, bear in mind, the development for the entire thing started in 1988. It still wasn't complete by the time of release, so several months later, when the CD32 came along, David Braben sat down and patched it as extensively as he could and made it a much better version. Now, for what I've been using, it's WHD Load Edition, which is I think it's probably the furthest along for like patches and things. I'm not sure what version number or anything like that, but there's not as many bugs compared to when it first came out. In total, it came out on 2 discs, and we'll touch on that in a bit. Coders, first was David Braben. He was behind the original Elite with Ian Bell at the time, but Ian Bell's not involved in the sequel. But he also did Elite Plus for the Amiga and Virus. That's like a weird 3D... Is it like an isometric shooter? I'm not sure. I think it reminds me of a game I played on the Acorn Archimedes. Is it Zacron? I can't remember. It's something beginning with a Z. That really is scraping the memory barrel there. Another coder involved was Peter J.M. Irvin. He also was involved with Exile, which is quite a famous I don't know what you call it. It's not really a platformer, is it? Because you're exploring with a little guy with a jetpack. Anyway, yeah, very, very odd. Graphics, both of them were involved with the graphics, and it was all a big push for the main game. They did have Jonathan Griffiths was involved, and he'd been a huge chat with the graphics for all the campaign games, Conqueror, things like that. And another guy called Paul Mitchell. He just seems to have been just a standard contractor. He only ever did Frontier, so I don't know what the hell happened there. I couldn't find anything out about his history. The music was done by David Lowe. Now, he'd been involved in games such as IK Plus, Railroad Tycoon, Street Fighter 2, Ghostbusters 2, a huge list. He was really prolific music composer for the Amiga. He was a lot of big games, so it's quite surprising going back through this. Now, if you're not familiar with Elite, it's basically a space trading game where you can go out into the universe, pretty much do what you want, trading, pirating, you know, you name it, you can do it, exploring different parts of the universe. At the time when it first came out, there'd been absolutely nothing like it, and it was years before there was, I mean, pretty much the sequel before anything even came close to the sort of depth of this game. It's like a space RPG in a way, but with a ship. I don't know how else to describe it, but, you know, things like dogfighting in there, the trading aspects, it was absolutely massive at the time, so it's no surprise that, and it was actually a huge seller as well, but it's no surprise that a sequel came along. But it did take, let's say, 1988 when they started development on this, so it was a good 5 or 6 years, and even then it wasn't really complete by the end. Elite itself is really famous. It's inspired so many space games over the years. I mean, there's even a modern re-release, and you've probably heard of it by now, but Elite Dangerous, just following on in the same vein. But obviously, with modern day computers, they're not as, it's not limited as it was compared to back then. One of the biggest pushes for this at the time, it was basically a universe on a single floppy disk. Now, I know I said before that there was 2 disks that came with it, but that's sort of not true, because the second disk doesn't contain any of the game. It has enough free space so you can use it as a save disk, and it also comes with several interesting save games that you can load up, you know, like being stuck in spots or souped up ships and things like that. And they were just put in there to give the player a chance to explore more. And I was reading in an interview that David Braben actually regrets including the second disc, because his big push had always been for that one disc release. That's what had been on his mind right from the beginning. And by putting in the second disc, even though it was useful for some players, it just took away that extra level of special, because people just think, yep, I'm going to have the second disc. I mean, if it had been me at the time, I'd have ended up, because I had an extra floppy disk drive, I'd have just had the 2 constantly loaded. I wouldn't have paid any attention to it, which is a shame, especially for what this actually is. Another thing that did surprise me, because this is absolutely huge, and the graphics, and even for the time, are absolutely gorgeous. You know, it's proper full-on 3D space, like strategy or flight sim time, and most of this was done by David Braben. He only get a little bit of help here around the edges and stuff. It's probably why it took him so long to get the thing done in the end. I mean, and why they were getting, GameTech and Konami were getting a bit cross and trying to push him to release it, because it was pretty much all down to him. It does share a hell of a lot of the same elements that came with the first one, like the trading or the combat and that type of stuff, and the you know, the universe to explore. But with this one, he really did try to expand it more. I mean, there's communication. It's basically like radio conversations. You can chat to different people and sort out missions, and you know, there's actually like mission elements and things to do. It might just be simple things like escorting people or getting from point A to point B and porting things back and forth. But strangely, there was none of that in the original game. It was just pretty much down to, it was almost like this is probably the wrong thing to say, but like database management in a way. You were just flying from space to space. There wasn't really any story involved with it. Now, the original game did actually come with this huge like novella which set the scene of how you got there. There is some of that in the sequel, just not as in-depth, but we'll touch on that in a bit. Now, this was meant to have a sequel, but I don't know what happened there. I mean, from what I could tell, it was cancelled pretty late in its development. It was called Frontier First Encounters. Now, bear in mind, Frontier was a huge seller, and he spent a good few years getting this ready, but the market either just wasn't right, and the company just didn't have the capital, I think, to sink into it, so it just drifted off and disappeared, and I don't think it exists at all. There's not any hidden copy stashed away in someone's attic somewhere, which is a shame, I think, unless somebody's been like some sort of leak or something that's happened, but I couldn't find it when I was looking into it. One thing I did notice about this, that it was classed as the best-selling game across all of Europe in 1993, according to Gallup charts. I couldn't actually get any sales figures out of that, just general reference in some magazines and stuff. So a huge seller, and must have been a massive success for him at the time. It's probably why the CD32 version even came along at all. Now, the game is actually based on our universe, so it would have been the mid-90s, so it was all matched up to actual space maps. I mean, you can actually visit Earth, and if you've got time, you can actually hunt down Big Ben, and if you actually fly up to it, assuming your time is set correctly on your Amiga, you can actually see the current time ticking and watch it ticking along and stuff. And there's a lot of little bits like this. You can pretty much visit anywhere you want to in our galaxy. I mean, straight away, just the fact you can do that in an Amiga is just absolutely fantastic. One of the great things it actually does do as well, it will work pretty well with whatever model of Amiga you've got, but the higher spec you've got, the smoother the frame rate is. If you compare this to, say, the A500 and the A1200, just the stock editions, there is a huge difference there. It's a lot smoother on the A1200, but when I pumped it up with like my expansion card and even tried it on the different emulators, even more incredible. I think I've tried 128 meg setup in the end, and it would just fly. It really would be like smooth. One of the ways you can tell this is when the opening, it's like an introduction starts up and there's ships flying along, and you see like the icon spinning like the Frontier, and it's like a planet spinning through space. On the slower Amigas, it's really slow and bit by bit, but on the faster Amiga you have, then the more it just turns and more smoothly, and it just looks really amazing. I'm really impressed that, coming from just a stock Amiga and then increasing it bit by bit, the more memory and stuff you put in, the better it runs, and that always is a huge plus in my eyes. With it being based in our universe, it's the first game to actually have real size planets that, you can actually fly up to them, into them, land in them, orbit them, whatever you want to do. They are proper real size. The distance between stars and planets is correct. It's all mapped out properly as it should be to a space map, an actual space map. I'm not just saying this is a game one and they've cut corners here and there. You can actually fly to them. It's like the equivalent of warp speed. This is an Amiga game, for God's sake. This is one hell of an achievement. I mean, the aim of the game, there isn't really an aim as such. But you're pretty much just dropped in there and you're just meant to explore, trade, go and see different parts of the universe. You can stay as a trader, you can be a miner, you can become a pirate. But one of the biggest pushes behind it all, I say it doesn't really have a story, but you're aiming towards the elite rank, which is brought over from the first game, and it really is tough to do that. You have to feel like you win points and things and get awarded as you go further and further throughout the universe. And one of the most impressive things I managed to find out for this is that there's over 100,000 worlds to explore, and it's pretty much, if you wanted to explore more, it's pretty much impossible because there just isn't enough time in in anybody's lifetime, probably several generations worth. But again, this is an Amiga game, for God's sake. This is the amount of content that's just included in this, and again, it's all based on a single floppy disk, and it's not randomly generated. These are proper planets and proper places. It's been mapped out hugely and massively. What an achievement! What an achievement! There isn't much of a story. The one line you do get, and I'll just read this out, is Commander Peter Jameson passes away on the 11th of November, 3199, leaving his last will and testament, a wrecked ship, 100 credits, and a hope you will go out and explore the galaxy, or simply put, to make as much cash as possible. And that's pretty much it. And there is actually in the manual a copy of like the last will and testament and instruction of things you can do and stuff. But it's very, very basic, and it's pretty much again what you got in the first game. But you're pretty much on your own. You can do whatever the hell you want. You know, you're not limited. There's no storyline to follow. You're not stuck in one place. The graphics are presented to you in a sort of 3D polygon based, or I don't know if it's polygons at that time. It might have been vectors. I'm not entirely sure. It probably was vectors because it was pretty early, like 92, 93. So yeah, I'm not sure if polygons were even a thing at that point. They were about to be anyway. It doesn't really matter. But straight away, the graphics are absolutely fantastic. It's all fully 3D rendered. It's like proper ship shapes and the planet, you know, objects on the planet as identifiable, other ships, stations, scenery that you explore. It's all very good and 3D rendered, and it's just pretty much for the time. It looks absolutely amazing. Now, what you get presented with when you first you appear in your ship, pretty much, you get a map, a function bar along the bottom of the screen. You get things like full readouts for like time controls, different views for the ship, so flipping through like the F keys, flight controls, galactic map, communications, inventory. Like I said, they're all, you can use the keyboard for this, or you can use the actual mouse and then flick between things. So it can be entirely button based, or you can use a mix of the two. If you've got the CD32 version, it's even better because you get to use a controller. Now, I was using a PS2 controller on my Amiga to play this, and I'm happy to say it works really, really well, but I wasn't using the stick to do that. Now, luckily, the controller does use multiple buttons. You get one for fire, one to straighten the ship, but at the same time, you can use the mouse, which I found to be a lot more responsive, to be honest. I mean, you can have fun with the controller if you want, but I found that was okay in short bursts when you want to have a bit of combat. But for most of the time, I was just using the mouse to straighten the ship, because it's just easy to have your right hand focusing on movement, your left hand flicking between the different keys like boosts of speed or weapons and things like that, and the fact that you can fire with a mouse. But it works pretty well. And when you get the manual's like 59 pages long. It's a bit of a beast, to be honest, but a big chunk of that is the tutorial. I'll get to that in a bit. But the great thing about the manual is it's quite straightforward. It explains a lot. It looks really, really complicated, but once you've spent a bit of time with it, you can really get into it. It's fairly easy to pick up. I mean, it probably took me about 10 or 15 minutes just to get into it and control it properly. And then once you're out in the galaxy and you're starting to explore, it just clicks nicely, and then it all brings you together. One of the great things about this is it uses a mix of like classical music. So you got things like Blue Danube by Strauss, Ride of the Valkyries by Wagner. You know, lots of recognizable tunes, and the Amiga does a really fantastic job with that Amiga sound. The opening theme is just absolutely fantastic. You do get a bit of an opening movie when it first starts, with ships flying about and firing at each other before it all focuses down on you just at the landing station we're about to take off. It's a really, really great introduction, and you get to see a big chunk of the planet before you even begin. One thing I will say for this, especially with the graphics, is the maps of the planets and everywhere you go, and the stations, and it's all really, really well done. They look fantastic. You know, it's very futuristic. It's very Star Trek and Star Wars. It just, you know exactly what everything is. It works the part. It's the future elements of it. It looks like you're in space, and you're exploring this full galactic empire. It matches. They, at the same time, they are pretty like basic polygon or vectors. Again, I'm not sure which, but they are cool. You know, the simple shapes to all the ships and things. I think the more powerful Amiga have, maybe it shows more. I'm not entirely sure of that. I didn't look into it too much. But what I'm trying to say is basically the graphics are fantastic. That's what it all boils down to. Now, of course, one of the things is you're in that ship all the time, and one thing this game would fail at, if it's possible to fail at anything, would be the controls, but it doesn't. I mean, it works really, really well. Now, it's been set up so that it controls like a spaceship would in real life. So what that means is you've got a fair bit of momentum. So if you use your thrusters or boost or fly anywhere, the ship just doesn't, it's not like very arcadey. It just doesn't stop dead. You can't like turn on a dime. There's always like an aura of momentum around everything you do. So you can find yourself drifting a fair bit. And a lot of the times when you're trying to land or get into, so it can be difficult, but you do get used to it. And it's got that element of, it's not speed, but of reality. And it really does work quite well when you're trying to control it. And I know a lot of people don't like this, but I mean, I found after about an hour, maybe 2 hours of play, I really settled into it. I got used to how the ship controls. And weirdly, it felt a lot more natural than, say, playing a more modern like space shooter and just having instant accessible on the spot, you know, turning on a dime sort of thing. I mean, you can turn quite well in this, but again, you've got that element of gravity. It always, is that the right word to put, that gravity, that pull, it really makes it stand out. Of course, you are able to land on planets and stations. It means you really get to explore the different sections, and it feels more real when you can actually bring your ship in and land and interact with everything. I'm not saying it in the sense that you can get out and start walking around. It just, you're not just flying up to like a body that's a planet and then just banging, say, one of the function keys just to bring up the communication. You actually have to take your time and land at a landing point of the station, and then you interact, and it feels more realistic that way. Now, I mean, I am in a way trying to review this, but one of the things I kept thinking whilst I was playing it is, this isn't really a game, and what I mean by that is, it's more of an experience. I mean, once you've learned the controls, you can pretty much start, you know, there's different starting points, there's always lots and lots of things to do and go and see and explore and stuff, but it's not just like any other like sort of game. There's not like a big mission or a storyline that you've got to follow through. It's pretty much you're out there to do whatever the hell you want, and it just gives you the tools to explore space and just exist. And that's what I mean. It's more of an experience. It's not a game. That is very bizarre, isn't it? Now, of course, it doesn't just drop you into all, well, it does in the sense that when you load it up, but it does have a rather fantastic tutorial. And I actually printed this off to work my way through when I first started out with the game, and it's probably about 29 pages long, I think. I mean, that's a big chunk of the main map. It might be a bit less than that, 20 to 30 pages long, but it really does, like, it shows you how to explore all the different sections, like the galactic star maps and the local communications and the weapons and the trading and the shops and stuff, because you can do things like upgrade your ships and the weapons, and, you know, when you visit different places because you're doing the trade, it shows you all the basics to do that, and then it just slings you off to a single place, gives you somewhere to locate with a couple of random missions, gives you an idea how to get there, and that's it. It just throws you off into space. It's like the perfect tutorial. Now, sadly, it may be limitations of the Amiga itself, but there is no sort of like tutorial within the game itself. You have to read that yourself. But I mean, I would insist, if you're going to go back to this, that you do that, because it's a requirement pretty much. But it's a pretty good tutorial, and for games of the time, especially with like flight simulators and this sort of thing, there was nothing really this in depth or to this that would walk you through step by step, give you a good idea of what you need to do, and then lead you off in the right direction. You do get a chance to upgrade your ship. You know, you can buy new ones. You get so many choices and things to do. You know, you can like buy weapons for the ship. You can trade on the stock market, buy and sell goods. You can even trade like drugs and people. A lot of this stuff's illegal, by the way. So that's the other thing. You can become a pirate if you want. You can do completely illegal things and get the galactic police chasing you down. Or you can stay a legit trader, earning points that way and building up your rank towards elite. There's just so many choices. Now, if you do anything illegal, say in the Federation territory, if you want it to be a pirate, you know, they will hunt you down. That's quite a funny part because it feels quite advanced in a way because they've got quite a good AI for that. So if you do anything dodgy, they'll come after you. But at the same time, you can do some smuggling and get away with things. And it's quite clever in the way it achieves it. Now, a lot of the missions need an awful lot of planning. You know, I mean, one of the main driving forces behind your ship is you need the fuel to be able to do anything and go anywhere. And every time you sit there and think, well, I'm going to go to stations A, D, F, Z, and then plan your route out, you need to keep in mind that when I get to these different points, I'm going to need fuel to get from point to point, and you need to plan it out properly. And that might sound a bit boring, but as long as you've got like one extra fuel for each occasion, then you're pretty much okay where you go. But it does add this interesting extra to the trade element, because a lot of things, if you've got a big trading run on, then you have to keep side planning and thinking, well, I'll need to stop here. Maybe if I do a mini trade between 2 points on the way, I'll build up enough money to get enough fuel and then carry on with the rest of the journey. And the further you go, of course, the more you explore, the more money, the more credits that you earn. So it just works really, really well. It makes you consider what you're not just out and you can't just go off in a random direction, just hope to survive. You need to plan ahead. You need to take your time and take things slowly. And it works really, really well for like the type of, it's like a simulator game. There is piles and piles of stuff to do. I mean, as you buy bigger ships, you even get like choice to hire a crew, pay wages. You know, you got to take that into consideration because they all need paying credits at the end of the day. You know, it's not just you on your own in the ship. Now, again, it's too early, so you can't really, it's not like in later games of this genre where you can go and talk to different members of the crew. There's nothing like that, but you have to take in consideration that if you've got a huge ship with extra people on board, they all need salary and they all do different jobs. You can do things, you can go mining, using things like landing drones. There's loads of weapons, things like mines, missiles, pulse lasers, I think they're called, plasma cannons. You know, there is so much to do in this. I mean, it really is a universe on a floppy disk, and I've never seen anything like it. It isn't perfect by any means, of course. It does have its faults. One of the biggest issues with it, in a way, I mean, it offers an awful lot of freedom, but I think especially with modern games, you expect to be given a lot more to do, in a way, in the sense that you need to be given like a direction and a push or a drive to go somewhere, and it doesn't have any story missions. And I'm sure, you know, for the time it was just a limitation for what you could actually do in the Amiga, but it really needed that element of like some sorts. Even the original had that like novella of setting the scene properly and pushing you off in the right direction. This one just gives you the will, and it's the same sort of thing, but there isn't like a free book with it. It doesn't set the scene for the universe. Pretty much what you see is what you get, and it's just a shame really that you've got like these communication parts, sections where you just sit there and you talk to other people via a console, but there's no sort of like, it's not in depth enough. It's very, very skimming like missions and stuff. It's very, very direct, going from A to B to D to Z. You know, there's just nothing beyond that, and it's a real shame, because if he'd maybe got someone else a bit more involved to do the story elements whilst he was writing the rest of the game, it might have come off even well, a lot better. Another issue I had was the sound effects. They're not exactly fantastic. They do well enough, I suppose. You know, the shooting at things, the noise that the ship makes, and that. It just becomes, because you're going to be playing this for a very, very long time, and it all becomes very samey after a bit, and all the sound effects are repeated constantly, so you can become a bit bored with it. Now, even though I was playing the latest edition that I could find, I did have a go on the floppy disk edition just to try it out, and there's a fair few bugs I noticed, which it shouldn't be any surprise, because he even said at the time that it had quite a few problems with them. But even when I was playing it, did crash a couple of times and proper like locked up the Amiga and didn't even come up with like the gory meditation message or anything like that, which was a bit annoying because I had to keep restarting the machine. But that didn't happen a lot. I would say it might happen, say, once an hour or once every other hour. So it wasn't exactly massive, but of course it was annoying, especially if you'd not saved for a bit because you were getting a bit caught up in, like, say, the combat or exploring somewhere, and then, you know, it goes and crashes. But what can you do? I mean, like I said, I had less problems with that when I was playing it on WHD load. So if you are going back to it, then by all means go for that. It's by far the best edition of it. Another bug that kept happening on a regular basis is the bulletin board, you know, where you get like the missions and things, can lock, and the fix for it seems to be if you just wait for around 24 hours. You do have time controls where you can speed up time and so on, but you still have to sit there for like a little bit just waiting for it to clock over. Nothing major, but it's just very, very annoying. You know, when you're in a rush and you're planning stuff out, and then you have to wait for the next mission to be selectable because it's locked. You can't do anything. But it always seems to reset after like 24 hours of in-game time, so it's not too bad. One of the biggest issues I did have when I started it is and I get the idea behind it, because the thinking is they want you to learn how to fly the ship and use it properly. But the thing is, you don't get any sort of like autopilot, you know. You can get it later on and it's an upgrade. I mean, that lets you do things like you can use the galactic map and then like do like plot a point on the map and then travel back and forth, which is fantastic when you get it. But once you've got it, you're never going to go back to not using it, and you can get it quite quickly. I think it took me about 20 to 30 minutes, and once I had it, I just never wanted to let it go. And you just think they should have just included that from the off, because once you are using it a lot, then you're not really going back to the old ways of relying. So it's just an odd thing that they should have put in right from the off. Another thing I did notice is, and I don't know if it's because I was doing it wrong, but the docking in this, compared to the first game, it's automatic, so you just fly up to the space station and it'll dock and stuff. But one of the greatest things about the original game is you had to go up to the actual station. There'd be like these big spinning like shapes in the air, and there'd be a little docking port, and you'd have to move your ship in a circle. This sounds really bizarre, and you'd have to, because you got the momentum of the ship, and you'd have to turn in time, so you'd be rocking and turning in a circle, and you push yourself forward, and you had to match like the rotational gravity of the station. God, it was really depressing actually thinking that. But I was an expert. I remember doing that loads of times in the BBC Micro, and I think you could get like automatic docking later on in the game, but this just seemed to have it right from the off. And I don't know, maybe you can turn that off, but I would have preferred just to leave that off, just because I enjoy like how calming and relaxing it is just being able to fly up to a station and then just dock manually, and then, you know, take your time and floating, you know. Yeah, what can I say? I think that one of its biggest flaws is, and I'm not a very good game player really, I was a bit worried when I was going into this that I'd get stuck in the combat, but I had no problems whatsoever. It was all a bit easy. Nothing was very pressing. They weren't out to get you. It wasn't like your classic game back in the day where it'd be so difficult that you get absolutely stumped. And in a way I like that, but it just meant that none of the combat you got into was very challenging. And even if you get stuck in combat, you can actually broadcast for allies or helping. Like if you're in Federation space, like the cops will fly over and actually help you out. I mean, you're not guaranteed someone's going to be there to always help you, but assuming you're saving your game enough whilst you're floating about, you can pretty much get away with it. That just feels though that it robs a bit of the difficulty from it. You know, you don't always want to be able to rely. I mean, it's a choice, I suppose. You don't have to broadcast for help, but the fact is that I think it'd be better if there was no option there at all. I prefer to be out on my own and then stuck in a situation. I'm sure by now you can pretty much tell what I think of this. I mean, it was absolutely fantastic. It really is a hell of an experience. Not just a game, it really is an experience. Going back to the magazine reviews of the days, Amiga Computing gave this 94%. CU Amiga 97%, The One 96%, Amiga Action 93%, Amiga Format 90%. Now I'm pretty sure straight away there you've seen a bit of a familiar pattern. This is pretty much high-end Amiga gaming. Now this is until we get to the Amiga Power review, who gave it 65%. Now I couldn't really understand what they were thinking with this score, to be honest, and I did read the review and he did bring up some valid complaints, I'll give it that, but the thing is, I think he actually called it boring, but I felt at the time, yeah, I suppose it's like a review is supposed to be like the individual's opinion, but at the same time, they're in a position of responsibility there. You know, they've got to look at this beyond the bigger picture and just say, you know, how does this, I might not like this element. It's like me saying, like, I hate football games and then say, I'm just going to play football games forever. It's just, there's no point to it. As a reviewer, you need to sit there and just think, well, I might not like these elements, but the elements it does have that I don't like, how will others perceive that? You know, how should I tackle it as part of the review? And I don't think he did that very, very well. That's Amiga Power. It was a very, very odd score. I mean, yeah, you might not like the game. You might have found it boring. I mean, it does have its problems. It's by no far, you know, it's not perfect, but there's certainly not enough there to drag it down to like a 6 or 7 out of 10. You know, that's a really, really poor game. And there's enough here to push it beyond the rubbish that was around at the time. It really is the perfect exploration game. I mean, especially for the time, there just really was nothing like this. You had to go back years to the first game to even get anything close to it. And whether you love or hate like space sims or combat games like this just feels special. Even just sitting down and starting it for the first time, it's not like the rest. It really does have that added extra element. I mean, it really is a marvel to play and experience, and you know, it really, really does deserve your time. I mean, I've been going back to this constantly. I mean, I've taken several weeks to play good chunks of this game because I really want to cover it well and get into it as deep as I could, but at the same time, I don't just want to do a review because my personal experience with this is it's going to be different to yours, but I want to just say to you that there's enough here. This really is something special. You should take your time with it. Go out there, you know, learn the tutorial, learn how to play it, and then just have some fun on your own and then just explore it as you should. One of its biggest achievements is the fact that it is a universe on a floppy disk. Yeah, we don't really use that as a format anymore, but just think about that, you know, a standard, you know, a floppy disk from back in that era, and you had an entire universe to go around and explore, and yeah, it's not like all randomly generated. There was this is a huge technical achievement, and really would have been an impressive demo at the time of what the Amiga can do. And even going back to it today, the fact that you can crank up the settings on your Amiga or expand your Amiga to heaven, and it really will show off what it can do because it'll run smoother and it'll be a much better running game. Yeah, absolutely fantastic. I really want to play more like this, and the more I get into it and the longer I spend with it, I keep thinking to myself, oh, what could I do next? And I keep thinking of maybe I should have a crack at Wing Commander, because that's something I've never really sunk enough time to. I played it a bit, but I've never really sunk a lot of time to. I think the Amigos covered that, so I think I'm going to go back and have another listen to that episode because I'm in the mood for some space combat. If anyone's got any recommendations for more space games, then by all means stick them in the Twitter account. I'll definitely have a look through it because I want to play some more. I'm hooked. What can I say? Anyway, what a perfect time to finish. That was, you know, it really was an amazing game and an amazing experience. I really do recommend it. I think everyone should at least give it a good hour's worth of your time. It's worth that much. As always, thanks for listening. If you want to leave any comments or even see some gameplay footage of this in action, just pop on over to AMIGArama.com. I do this for all the games. There's always a good 30 minutes worth of footage there, so even if you don't want to play it, come and have a look because I think you'll enjoy what I've gone and put up. Anyway, until next time, guys.